The Federation's diplomatic shuttle glided silently through the vastness of space, a gleaming speck against the backdrop of the endless cosmos. Commander John Morton, sitting alone in the cockpit, ran a hand through his short, blond hair, adjusting his formal uniform. His military-grade dress blues fit him like a second skin, the sharp lines and crisp details more familiar than any other attire. His muscular frame, accustomed to the flexibility of combat gear, felt oddly constrained in the ceremonial uniform. But duty called, and this was no time for comfort. The shuttle's hum was soothing, a constant rhythm that matched John's own pulse as he mentally reviewed the parameters of his mission. Deliver the Federation's condolences for the sudden death of King Orion, ruler of Alaris, and convey a strategic proposal for future military collaboration. Simple enough. The Federation rarely sent military personnel for diplomatic duties, especially not to remote worlds like Alaris. It was meant to be a formality, an easy task, just a brief stop to remind the Alarians of their place in the Federation. John had done this sort of thing hundreds of times. Get in, say the right things, deliver the message, and leave. No complications. Shuttle's descent was smooth, breaking through the thick cloud cover of Valoria, Alaris's capital city. The towering spires of the city gleamed in the sunlight, their sharp angles and smooth surfaces reflecting a culture of proud independence, despite their allegiance to the Federation. The city was a stunning juxtaposition of the old and new, ancient architecture blending seamlessly with sleek modern structures. The planet itself was small, its resources limited, but the Alarians valued their autonomy and their history, which, for reasons John couldn't entirely fathom, made this visit feel different than others. Candor, the pilot's voice broke the silence. Atmospheric conditions optimal. Local time is mid-afternoon. John nodded, his eyes narrowing as he took in the view of the bustling metropolis below. His mind was already running through the nuances of his diplomatic message, but a flicker of unease lingered at the edge of his thoughts. Something wasn't right. He couldn't put his finger on it, but there was an energy in the air that felt charged, a tension in the atmosphere that made this mission feel anything but routine. As the shuttle touched down with barely a tremor, John squared his shoulders, his stern demeanor locking into place. The boarding ramp extended smoothly, and he stepped into the warmth of the planet's sun, blinking momentarily as his eyes adjusted to the brightness. A small delegation awaited him, led by a figure whose presence commanded attention even from a distance. Princess Thalia of Vara. She stood tall and poised, her emerald green skin catching the sunlight in a way that made it shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Her long silvery white hair cascaded down her back in intricate braids, each one interwoven with tiny glowing beads that caught the light with every movement. Her features were regal and almost ethereal, her bright blue eyes luminous with an intensity that was both captivating and unsettling. When she met John's gaze, it was with an expression that seemed to pierce through him, as if she could see straight into his thoughts. "Commander Morton," she said, her voice melodious, her accent making his name sound exotic. "Welcome to Alaris. I trust your journey was uneventful?" John bowed his head slightly, maintaining the formal distance required by his station, though. There was a flicker of something in her eyes that unsettled him. "Princess Thalia, on behalf of the Federation Council, I extend our deepest condolences for your loss. Your father was highly respected throughout the galaxy." At the mention of King Orion, a flicker of something crossed Thalia's face. Grief, perhaps, or exhaustion, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a composed mask of royal dignity. "Thank you, Commander," she replied, her tone steady. "Please follow me. We can speak more privately in the palace." John fell into step beside her, the two of them walking through the vast corridors of the palace. He couldn't help but notice how her dark attire, accented with thin silver lines, accentuated the graceful movements of her form. The guards, all male as per the traditional customs of Alaris, flanked them silently, their eyes scanning the surroundings with an alertness that was both practiced and unnerving. Thalia's voice broke the silence. "I must admit," she said, her words measured, but with an underlying curiosity, "I was surprised the Federation sent someone of your stature. Typically, we receive diplomats, not warriors." John forced a smile, though it felt tight, as if the words didn't quite fit. "These are unusual times, Your Highness." Dahlia's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Indeed, they are." As they entered the grand hall of the palace, John couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just a routine diplomatic mission. The tension in the air, the way Thalia watched him with those sharp, unblinking eyes, it was as if she was sizing him up, testing him in ways he wasn't used to. He'd dealt with foreign dignitaries and royal families before, but nothing about this situation felt like anything he'd encountered. Something was off. And as his gaze met Thalia's once more, that sense of unease deepened, swirling with the unmistakable feeling of a deeper connection between them, one that neither of them had yet acknowledged, but which John could not ignore, despite the formal nature of their roles. John could feel the first hints of something else between them, an unspoken bond that defied their professional distance. The air in the palace felt thick, heavier somehow, as if it were charged with history and secrets. John followed Thalia through the grand corridors, his boots echoing on the polished stone floors, the sound amplified in the silence that surrounded them. He couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves were watching, keeping their own counsel. Thalia led him through a series of ornate chambers, each one more regal than the last, until they reached a set of hidden doors at the back of the palace. With a graceful motion, she placed her hand against the stone, whispering something in a language John didn't understand. The doors slid open silently, revealing a spiral staircase that seemed to descend deeper into the heart of the palace. As they moved down the staircase, the air grew cooler, and the ambient lighting shifted from the warm, golden hues of the palace to a more subdued, ethereal glow. John couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as they ventured further below ground. The atmosphere in this part of the palace was different, ancient, as if untouched by time, and yet strangely alive, pulsing with a quiet energy that hummed in the air. "Where exactly are we going, Princess?" John asked, his voice breaking the silence. He tried to keep his tone neutral, professional, but the curiosity bubbling beneath the surface couldn't be contained. He had seen parts of Alaris history. He had seen the grandeur of the capital city, but nothing about this place felt like anything he had expected. "To the Chamber of Relics," Thalia answered, her voice echoing slightly in the narrow passage. "It's where we keep the treasures of our golden age before we became just another valued Federation world." There was a bitterness in her tone, an undercurrent of resentment that John couldn't ignore. The word treasures caught John's attention. Was this just another part of the usual royal protocol, a show of history and heritage for a visiting diplomat? Or was there more to it? As they descended deeper, he couldn't shake the sense that there was more to this trip than he was being told. His military instincts, honed over years of service, told him to be on guard. But for what? They finally reached the bottom of the staircase, and John found himself in a vast circular chamber, its walls bathed in soft, blue light that seemed to emanate from the very stone. Display cases lined the perimeter, each one holding strange, intricate devices and artifacts, relics of a time long past. John felt a moment of awe as he gazed at the artifacts. Some of them were unlike anything he had ever seen, objects that seemed to defy logic or understanding. But it was the center of the room that drew his attention. A suit of armor stood on a raised platform, surrounded by a soft glow of light. The armor was old, dusty, and forgotten compared to the pristine relics surrounding it. It looked out of place as though it had been left here by mistake, a relic that time had overlooked. "Behold," Thalia said with a dramatic flourish, her voice taking on a theatrical quality as she gestured toward the armor. "The glorious past of Alaris, when we were creators and innovators, not just a strategic outpost for your Federation." John stepped forward, his curiosity growing. "These technologies, they're unlike anything I've seen," he muttered, his eyes scanning the intricate designs of the artifacts. The room was filled with the weight of Alaris' forgotten history. Its once great civilization, now reduced to a small player on the galactic stage. There was a palpable sadness in the air, as if the world had lost something irreplaceable. "That's because they predate your Federation by millennia," Thalia replied, moving to stand beside him. The proximity of her presence sent an unexpected jolt through John's system, but he pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "My ancestors understood sciences that your people are only beginning to grasp." John studied the suit of armor more closely. Despite its apparent age, something about its design seemed strangely familiar, as though he had seen similar markings on Federation technology. But this was different, more ancient, more powerful. There was something unsettling about it, as if it held a secret John wasn't meant to understand. Thalia's lips curled into a mischievous smile as she turned to him. "Would you like to try it on, Commander? Just for amusement's sake?" John blinked, momentarily caught off guard by her playful challenge. He glanced at the armor again, his instincts telling him that this was more than just a relic. "Is that ... appropriate?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, it's just a relic now," she said, dismissively, waving her hand. "Nothing happens when you touch it. Perhaps human hands might provide some entertainment." Her tone carried a challenge, though her smile remained playful, teasing even. John hesitated for a moment. There was something in her eyes, something deeper than mere amusement. It was as if she were testing him, probing to see what he was made of. Despite his better judgment, John stepped forward, his fingers brushing against the dusty breastplate of the ancient armor. He wasn't sure why he was doing this. Part of him told him it was nothing more than a foolish joke, a way to humor the princess. Another part of him, however, felt a strange pull, an inexplicable connection that drew him closer to the armor. And then, as his fingers made contact, something impossible happened. A blue energy suddenly surged across the surface of the armor, lighting up intricate patterns John had not noticed before. The entire suit seemed to vibrate, almost as if it were alive, and for a brief moment, John thought he was imagining things. But then, to his shock, the individual pieces of the armor began to disassemble themselves, floating in the air as if moved by an invisible force. "What the—" John barely managed to gasp before the pieces of the armor rushed toward him, attaching themselves to his body with a force he couldn't comprehend. The sensation was unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was as if the armor were embracing him, molding itself to his body, perfectly conforming to his human physiology, despite the fact that it was designed for a completely different species. Across the chamber, Thalia stood frozen, her eyes wide with disbelief. One hand raised to her lips in shock, she whispered something under her breath, though John couldn't make out the words. But there was no mistaking the awe in her expression. "Impossible," she whispered as the helmet settled over John's head. He felt a surge of energy course through his entire body. It was overwhelming, like a flood of information pouring into his mind. Star charts, weapon schematics, battle strategies knowledge from civilizations long extinct flashed before his eyes. Power hummed through him, familiar yet alien, as if the armor was awakening something inside him that he didn't fully understand. The connection to Thalia remained, though pulling at him, as if she too were part of the awakening. She had watched him try on the armor as a joke, but now it was clear this was no ordinary artifact. This was a key, a gateway to something far more profound. John struggled to find his voice, his words altered by the strange, metallic voice emanating from the helmet. "Princess, what exactly is happening to me?" Thalia's eyes met his, filled with fear, hope, and something else. It was in that moment that John realized he wasn't just a diplomat anymore. He was part of something much larger, something that had been waiting for him all along. John's heart raced as the surge of energy continued to pulse through him, his mind reeling with the flood of ancient knowledge. The room around him seemed to blur, and for a moment he lost track of where he was, the boundaries between his own body and the armor blurring into something greater. His body felt both heavier and lighter at the same time, the armor no longer a foreign object, but an extension of his very being. "Princess," he managed to whisper, his voice coming out distorted and metallic. What is this?" Thalia stood frozen, her bright blue eyes wide with shock and awe. The sight of John, now encased in the glowing armor, seemed to paralyze her. With a mix of wonder and fear, the armor hummed with a strange resonance, its glowing patterns matching the rhythm of John's heartbeat, responding to him as if alive. This isn't possible," Thalia breathed, her voice barely a whisper. She stepped closer, her gaze fixed on him, and John felt her presence like a weight on his chest. It wasn't the same casual observation from before this time. Her eyes were searching, probing, as if she were looking for answers in the very person before her. "What have you done?" she whispered, but John barely heard her. His senses were overloaded. He could feel the systems of the armor adjusting, shifting with his every breath, mapping his physiology in ways that made his head spin. The knowledge flooding his mind was ancient, complex, and terrifying in its scope. How could a mere suit of armor contain this much power? John's chest tightened, a strange discomfort seizing him as his body fought to keep up with the influx of data. His breathing became labored, his muscles trembling under the weight of the energy coursing through him. The armor responded, adjusting itself to counterbalance the pressure. But John could feel it. There was more to this than he had ever anticipated. Thalia, still staring at him, seemed to sense his discomfort. Her voice was steady, but there was a trace of urgency now. "Commander, you have to listen to me," she said, stepping forward once more. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of concern and awe, locked onto his helmet. "The armor, it's not just a relic. It's a weapon. A legacy of my people, designed to fight the Voidern. It chooses its wearer, but only in times of great need. And it's never chosen anyone in centuries." John blinked, struggling to process her words as the armor continued to hum with unnatural power. His mind was flooded with star charts, battle plans, and weapon schematics, all of them foreign but familiar, seeping into his consciousness. He was overwhelmed, and yet there was a strange comfort in it, like the armor itself was guiding him. Through the chaos, the Voidern? John's voice came out strange, distorted by the helmet systems. What are the Voidern? Thalia took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving him. "They are an ancient enemy of my people, Commander. They come from the spaces between stars, drawn to planets rich with life energy. They are parasites, consuming everything in their path. They've hunted my people for millennia, and we have never been able to stop them." John felt a ripple of understanding run through him. The information from the armor shifted, showing him Imja's nightmarish creatures, dark energy swirling around them like a black fog. The Voidern weren't just physical, they were a force of nature, capable of consuming entire civilizations in their wake. John's stomach churned as he processed what Thalia was telling him. "But I'm not a Larian," John murmured, still struggling with the surreal sensation of the armor. "Why did it choose me? I don't even belong here." Thalia's expression softened, but there was a shadow of something deeper in her eyes. It shows you because you are more than just a human soldier, John. The armor is tied to the legacy of my ancestors. The prophecy speaks of an outsider, someone who would awaken the armor in our darkest hour. We always believed it would be someone from beyond our system, not a human. Her voice trailed off, the weight of that revelation settling between them. John's head spun, but the armor seemed to stabilize him, adapting to his confusion. It felt like a part of him now, and for the first time, John truly understood what Thalia meant. The armor was more than just a piece of technology. It was alive with the memories and power of Alaris. Thalia's voice broke through his reverie. You need to understand, Commander. This armor was created for one purpose only, to stop the Voidern. And now, the Voidern are here. She reached out, her hand brushing lightly against the metallic surface of his chest. And I think it has chosen you because you are the only one who can stop them. A chill ran down John's spine, but it wasn't fear. It was something else, a flicker of recognition, of purpose, deep inside the armor. The moment was broken by the harsh shrill of a siren blaring throughout the palace. The sound was so sudden, so jarring, that John's instincts kicked in immediately. Thalia's communicator crackled, and a voice, urgent and filled with panic, echoed through the chamber. Your Highness, unidentified vessels have entered orbit. They're not responding to hails and have deployed drop ships. The voice trembled with fear. We're under attack. John's muscles tensed as the weight of the situation hit him like a sledgehammer. He turned his gaze to Thalia, his voice calm but filled with resolve. We need to get to the surface now. Thalia hesitated for a fraction of a second, her eyes locked onto his helmet. She could see it in him. Now something had changed. The armor had activated, and John was no longer just a diplomat. He was the key to Alaris's survival. You don't know what's happening to you, John, Thalia said, her voice tight with concern. What that armor means, it's more than just a weapon. It's a part of you now. John nodded, the armor systems resonating with him as he prepared to move. No time for explanations, he said, his voice now altered by the helmet, but filled with a strength he hadn't known before. We're under attack. Let's save your people. Thalia's eyes softened for a moment, before hardening again with the weight of her responsibilities. Follow me, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. There's a faster way to get to the surface. John followed her, his movements instinctive now, the armor responding to every step, every shift in his body. He could feel the weight of what was happening, the weight of the prophecy, the legacy of the armor, and now the responsibility to protect Alaris. The battle was beginning, and John Morton, once a simple soldier, had just become the galaxy's last hope. The corridors of the palace seemed endless as John followed Thalia through the labyrinthine halls, the metallic hum of his new armor resonating with every step. His mind was still reeling, the flood of information from the armor overwhelming him. Yet somehow it seemed to guide his movements with an uncanny precision. He could feel the energy thrumming in the very air, like a current he was now part of, connected to the ancient technology that surrounded him. Thalia moved ahead, her pace steady and purposeful, but John could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted around, alert to every sound, every movement. The calm facade of the palace was shattered now. The air was thick with urgency, the weight of the situation pressing down on them both. They were under attack, and John was no longer just a messenger. He was now Alaris's protector, its guardian. Princess, where exactly are we headed? John asked, his voice coming out distorted through the helmet's communication system. His body felt heavier now, the weight of the armor settling around him, its intricate systems syncing with his every thought. But the power it granted him came at a cost. He could feel the energy drain, the armor drawing on his life force to fuel its capabilities. It was more than just a suit. It was a living entity, connected to him, feeding on his vitality. Thalia glanced over her shoulder, her gaze lingering on him for a moment before she answered, her voice tense but controlled. The command center. It's the only place we can coordinate a defense. The palace shields are holding for now, but the city's outer defenses have been breached. The Voidern are already deploying ground forces. They're getting closer. John's stomach tightened at the mention of the Voidern. He had barely begun to process the sheer scale of the threat. These were the creatures the armor had been designed to fight shadowy, energy-consuming beings that preyed on life itself. And now they were here, invading Alaris, just as the armor had awakened. I'm guessing the Federation didn't know about these things, John muttered, more to himself than to Thalia. We're fighting behind here. Thalia's lips pressed into a thin line, her eyes narrowing in frustration. The Federation has always kept our enemies in the dark. The Voidern are a threat we've been battling alone for centuries. The Federation's protection has always been more about maintaining control than actually helping us. Her words stung, but John didn't have time to dwell on them. There was no time for politics, now only survival. They reached a large chamber, its walls lined with communications equipment and tactical displays, where several officers were already at work, monitoring the growing threat. The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of urgency and fear. As they entered, a military officer saluted sharply. "Your Highness, Commander," he said, his voice tight with anxiety. "The palace shields are still holding, but we're losing control of the perimeter. The Voidern are closing in." John's eyes scanned the monitors, taking in the data, his mind working quickly to process the information. He could see the dark, shifting forms of the Voidern moving through the city's outer districts, devouring everything in their path. People were fleeing, but the Voidern were relentless. They consumed life energy, leaving nothing but desolation behind. Thalia turned to John, her expression hardening. "We can't afford to wait any longer. The Voidern are after the heart of Alaris, the source of our power. If they reach it, the entire planet will fall." John felt a surge of energy course through him, the armor responding to his resolve. It was as though the armor was sensing his determination, amplifying it, feeding on his need to act. The flood of information was now clearer, sharper, the armor's capabilities becoming more intuitive with every passing second. He could feel it, the knowledge of ancient battles, tactics, and weapon systems being fed directly into his mind. "I'm ready," John said, his voice more confident now, the metallic distortion gone. "Let's stop them." Thalia gave him a nod of approval, but her eyes remained focused, filled with something John couldn't quite name: hope, fear, or perhaps both. "Follow me," she said again, leading him out of the command center and toward the palace's eastern exit. "The quickest route to the surface is through the transport tunnels. We'll get you into position." John's heart pounded in his chest as they moved quickly through the palace. The air felt charged with anticipation, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the empty hallways. He could feel the weight of the situation settling over him. This wasn't just a diplomatic mission anymore. It was a battle for the survival of an entire world. And somehow, despite everything, John was at the center of it. They reached a hidden doorway, the ancient stone seemingly parting to allow them entry into a dimly lit tunnel. The walls of this tunnel were etched with the same intricate designs John had seen in the Chamber of Relics, but here the markings seemed more worn, as if they had been forgotten by time. "Through here," Thalia urged, her voice steady as she led the way. The transport tube ahead of them hummed with power, a silent reminder of the advanced technology that had once made Alaris a force to be reckoned with. Now, it seemed like their only hope. John stepped into the transport tube, feeling the cool air rush past him as the system activated. The walls of the tunnel blurred as they sped toward the surface. His mind raced, processing the information flooding through him from the armor. He could feel the energy building inside him, a mixture of adrenaline and power coursing through his veins. Beside him, Thalia moved with quiet determination, her gaze locked ahead. For a moment, John's thoughts turned inward, reflecting on everything that had led him here, how a simple diplomatic mission had turned into a fight for survival. But the more he thought about it, the clearer it became. The armor, the prophecy. His connection with Thalia, this was no coincidence. This was his purpose. The transport tube shot upward, and John felt the familiar pressure of acceleration press against his body. His hands clenched into fists, the armor responding instinctively. The energy inside him surged, and he could feel the very core of the armor resonating with the urgency of the situation. The tube finally slowed, and the doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the devastation outside. The city of Valoria lay before them, darkened by the shadow of the Voidorn's assault. The streets were filled with smoke, and the once pristine buildings were crumbling under the assault. The air was thick with the stench of burning debris, and John could hear the distant sounds of screams, the cries of those who were still trapped in the chaos. John's hand rested on the hilt of his weapon, the energy humming through his armor. He was ready. We're too late to stop the invasion, but we can still protect the heart of Alaris, Thalia said, her voice unwavering despite the destruction around them. We have to reach it before the Voidorn do. John nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused on the path ahead. The battle was just beginning, and this time, he wasn't just a soldier. He was something more. He was the Guardian. The streets of Valoria stretched out before them, a surreal scene of destruction and chaos. The once pristine city, known for its elegant architecture and proud heritage, now stood in tatters. The Voidorn had arrived with brutal efficiency. There, dark energy seeping into every corner of the city, consuming everything in its path. The air felt heavy with tension, thick with the stench of burning structures and the acrid smoke that billowed up from the ruined districts. The cry of sirens echoed through the streets, a constant reminder of the nightmare unfolding around them. John felt the weight of the armor settle around him, every movement now as natural as his own skin. The armor was more than just protection. It was part of him. His thoughts were sharpened, his senses heightened, and as they emerged from the transport tube, John felt the pulse of power beneath his feet, a silent rhythm that connected him to Alaris itself. It was as if the city's very energy was flowing through him. Beside him, Thalia moved with quiet determination, her emerald skin glowing softly in the dim light. Despite the chaos around them, she maintained her regal composure, her eyes fixed. Ahead, it was impossible not to be drawn to her, the way she moved, with grace and purpose, as if the destruction didn't faze her. But John could see the tension in her posture, the way her fists clenched at her sides whenever the distant sounds of explosions reached their ears. We're almost there, Thalia said, her voice steady, though John could hear the underlying edge of worry. She didn't look at him as she spoke, her gaze locked on the horizon, where the smoke and debris billowed up into the sky like dark storm clouds. The heart of Alaris is located beneath the royal palace, hidden, protected by centuries of secrets. But the Voidorn, they know about it now, and they won't stop until they have it. John nodded grimly, his hand tightening around the hilt of his weapon. He had seen the creatures on the monitors earlier, shadowy, amorphous forms that seemed to absorb the very life force of everything they touched. He had felt the power of the armor surge through him when he first donned it, but now, with the Voidorn closing in, he felt that power surging once again. But this time, it wasn't just energy, it was something deeper, something more primal. The armor's power was connected to Alaris itself, and in that moment, John understood just how much was at stake. Thalia led him through the devastated streets, her eyes scanning the ruins with a mix of determination and sorrow. The streets were eerily quiet, except for the occasional distant rumble of explosions, a stark contrast to the once bustling city that had been a symbol of Alaris's pride. John could feel the weight of her gaze on him, but he didn't turn to look at her. There was no time for distractions now. As they neared the palace, the destruction grew more intense. The buildings that once lined the streets had been reduced to rubble. The elegant gardens that surrounded the palace now blackened and withered as though they had been consumed by the Voidorn's dark energy. The sky above them was tinged with an unnatural shade of purple, the air heavy with the scent of decay and death. John's mind raced, his focus sharpening with each passing second. The Voidorn were close, their presence unmistakable. But there was something else, a strange, almost primal pull deep within the armor, a feeling that seemed to grow stronger the closer they got to the palace. It was as though the armor was reacting to the presence of the Voidorn, and it was now more than just a tool for battle. It was a weapon, alive with the knowledge of how to defeat their enemies. Thalia stopped suddenly, raising her hand to signal for John to halt. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the path ahead, the tension in her posture palpable. John followed her gaze, his eyes scanning the horizon. "They're here," Thalia said softly, her voice tense with the realization. "The Voidorn have already breached the palace's outer defenses. They'll be inside soon." John clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of the armor around him. "We need to get inside and secure the heart," he said, his voice firm and steady. The words felt more like a command than a suggestion, and he could feel the armor resonating with his resolve. Thalia nodded, her face set with determination. "We'll take the back entrance," she said. "It's less guarded. If we're lucky, we'll make it to the heart before they do." The two of them moved swiftly, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of ash and debris that now covered the once pristine streets. As they approached the back entrance to the palace, John could see the remnants of the royal guards, lying motionless on the ground, their once pristine armor now marred by the corruption of the Voidorn. The sight sent a chill through John's spine, but he didn't let it slow him. They had a mission to complete. Thalia pushed open the hidden door, revealing a dark, narrow passageway that led deep into the heart of the palace. The air was cold and damp, a stark contrast to the heat of the battle raging outside. John stepped forward, the armor systems adjusting to the shift in temperature as he followed Thalia into the darkness. They moved in silence, their footsteps echoing in the narrow passage as they descended into the depths of the palace. John's thoughts were sharp, focused entirely on the mission. The Voidorn were closing in, and every second they wasted could mean the difference between life and death for Alaris. Thalia led the way, her movements swift and practiced. She seemed to know this place like the back of her hand, her feet moving with confidence through the darkened corridors. John kept close behind, his mind racing as he tried to process the enormity of what was happening. The heart of Alaris, this legendary artifact, was the key to defeating the Voidorn. If they didn't reach it first, the planet would fall. As they reached the final chamber, John's senses heightened, the air growing thick with the weight of the power contained within the walls. Thalia turned to him, her eyes glowing with determination. "John, this is it," she said, her voice low, but filled with urgency. "If we don't stop them here, everything will be lost." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within him. This was their last chance. They couldn't afford to fail. He stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. And for the first time since he had donned the armor, he truly understood what he was fighting for. Alaris, its people, and Thalia, everything rested on this moment. Together, They moved toward the heart. And with each step, John felt the power of the armor surge through him, preparing him for the battle that would decide the fate of an entire world. The final chamber of the palace felt like the heart of Alaris itself. The walls were ancient, covered in faded but intricate carvings that told the story of a time long past of glory, of innovation, and of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. The air in the chamber was thick with the weight of history, and John could feel the power of the armor pulsing in his chest, resonating with the energy that seemed to emanate from the stone itself. Thalia paused just inside the chamber, her gaze fixed ahead. Her face was set in an expression of steely determination, but John could see the flicker of fear in her eyes. The Voidern had already breached the palace, and they were now closing in on the heart of Alaris. If they reached it first, everything would be lost. John stepped forward, the heavy weight of the armor shifting with each movement. It felt like it was a part of him now. His body was one with the suit, each step, each breath in sync with the ancient technology that encased him. He could feel the power thrumming beneath his skin, responding to his every thought, every instinct. The armor was no longer just a weapon. It was a conduit, a living extension of his will, and it was ready to fight. Thalia turned to him, her blue eyes filled with a quiet urgency. "The heart of Aris is located in the center of this chamber," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It's a crystal and ancient artifact created by my ancestors. It holds the power of our world. If the Voidern touch it, they'll consume its energy and use it to tear open a rift to their dimension. Alaris would fall, and so would the galaxy." John nodded, his jaw tightening. He could already feel the strain of the armor on his body, the energy it required to function. It was a constant drain, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't about his physical endurance anymore. It was about survival. "Where is it?" John asked, his voice steady despite the chaos that loomed just beyond the palace walls. Thalia's gaze shifted to the center of the chamber. At the heart of the room stood a raised dais, upon which rested an ancient throne, a relic of Alaris's golden age. But it wasn't the throne that caught John's attention. It was what lay beneath it, partially obscured by the stonework. A glowing blue crystal, its surface rippling with an energy that seemed almost alive. "That is the heart of Alaris," Thalia said, her voice reverent as she stepped closer. "The power source of our people. The Voidern have always sought it. They are drawn to its energy, and they will stop at nothing to take it." John felt the energy from the armor stir within him as his eyes locked onto the crystal. It wasn't just an object, it was the heart of the world, and it was connected to him now, as though the armor had recognized its importance and was aligning itself with it. He stepped closer, his every movement fluid, controlled, as if the armor was guiding him, responding to his thoughts. Suddenly, the silence of the chamber was shattered by a sharp, resonating hum. The Voidern were here. Thalia's expression darkened. "They've found us." John's senses were immediately flooded with information. The location of the Voidern forces, the movements of their ships outside, the energy signatures of the creatures. The armor's neural interface connected him to the battlefield, projecting tactical data directly into his mind. It was overwhelming, but John processed it with the calm precision of a seasoned soldier. "Can you hold them off?" Thalia asked, her voice tense with a mix of hope and fear. John's hands flexed, and the armor responded, reconfiguring itself, amplifying his strength. He could feel the power of the crystal pulse through the chamber, the energy from the heart reaching into his very being. The Voidern were coming, but he was ready. "I'll hold them off," John said, his voice low and steady. "You get to the heart." Thalia's eyes widened, a flash of concern crossing her features. "No, John, we." But John was already moving. He didn't have time for hesitation. His feet propelled him forward, the armor's enhanced speed carrying him across the room in seconds. The Voidern were close now, their dark, shadowy forms creeping into the chamber. John could feel their presence, an oppressive weight pressing down on him. The armor hummed with power, and John raised his hands, feeling the energy surge through his limbs. The Voidorn's dark energy seemed to push against the very air itself, but John's connection with the heart gave him the strength to resist. He extended his arms, and the armor responded, channeling the energy into a powerful pulse that shattered the silence with a crackling force. A wave of blue light erupted from his hands, pushing the Voidern back with an intensity that surprised even him. The creatures shrieked as the energy tore through them, their shadowy forms evaporating into nothingness where the light touched them. John's heart raced as he turned to face the remaining Voidern. He could feel his energy reserves draining, but the armor compensated, drawing on the power of the heart, amplifying his strength. He wasn't just fighting for Alaris now. He was fighting for his own survival, for the survival of everything he held dear. Thalia's voice broke through his focus, calm but urgent. "John, we don't have much time. The heart ... it's unstable. If we don't secure it now, it will be too late." John glanced back toward the dais, where Thalia was already moving toward the crystal, but the Voidern weren't done yet. More of them emerged from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unholy hunger, drawn to the energy radiating from the heart. John gritted his teeth and raised his hands once more. The armor responded, its systems amplifying his power until he felt like a conduit for the heart's energy itself. His body hummed with power as he unleashed another wave of light, pushing the Voidern back, scattering them like dark smoke in the wind. "Go!" John shouted to Thalia, his voice filled with urgency. "Get to the heart." Thalia's eyes met, his filled with both fear and determination. She nodded, her movements swift as she crossed the chamber, her hand outstretched toward the glowing crystal. John continued to fight, holding the Voidern at bay with the raw power of the armor. Each blast of energy took more from him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Not now. Not when everything depended on this moment. And then, as if the universe itself had decided to take mercy on him, the last of the Voidern fell. They crumbled into dust, their forms disintegrating as the light from the armor consumed them. John collapsed to his knees, the weight of exhaustion bearing down on him. His breath came in ragged gasps, but he managed to lift his head. Thalia had reached the heart, her hand touching the crystal surface, and for a moment the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The energy in the chamber pulsed, brighter now, stronger. The heart was responding to Thalia, to their connection. John could feel it too, like a warmth spreading through him, replenishing the strength he had lost. And then, just as the Voidorn's presence seemed to vanish, something changed in the air. The pulse of energy from the heart grew brighter, more vibrant, as though the planet itself was awakening, responding to the power within John and Thalia. The battle was over. Alaris had been saved. But the journey had only just begun. John remained on his knees, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him like a mountain. His body ached, every muscle strained from the battle and the armor's relentless demands. The energy he had channeled through it was draining, but as the light from the heart of Alaris grew brighter, he could feel it, a warmth spreading through his chest, a comforting pulse that seemed to fill him with vitality. It wasn't just the armor replenishing him. It was something deeper, something connected to the heart, to the very core of Alaris itself. The chamber around him flickered with an ethereal glow, the air alive with the pulse of energy. The Voidern were gone, their dark presence erased from the palace as if they had never existed. For a fleeting moment, everything felt still, peaceful even. Thalia stood in front of the heart, her hands resting lightly on the glowing crystal. The radiance that emanated from it bathed her in a soft blue light, and for the first time, John saw her not just as the princess of Alaris, but as something else, a symbol of the hope, the resilience, and the strength that had led her people through centuries of adversity. She was no longer just a royal figure. She was the embodiment of her world's legacy, and now their fates were intertwined. The air shifted, and John pushed himself up, the armor's weight becoming less oppressive as the energy from the heart continued to flow through him, replenishing his strength. He stood slowly, his knees still trembling, but his mind clearer now, the fog of exhaustion lifting. His senses were sharpened, heightened by the connection he had formed with the heart, with the armor, and with Thalia. It was a bond that went beyond physical proximity, beyond duty. It was something deeper, something timeless. Thalia turned to him, her blue eyes reflecting the light of the heart, but there was something else in them now, a mixture of awe, relief, and something more, something that John couldn't quite name, but he felt it in the air between them. It was the same energy that had surged through him when he first donned the armor, the same pulse that connected them both to the heart of Laris. John. Thalia's voice broke the silence, soft but filled with a quiet reverence. We did. You did it. John shook his head, a tired smile tugging at the corner of his lips. We did it, Princess. Together. She stepped closer to him, her hand reaching out, and for a moment, John thought she might touch him again, but she hesitated, her gaze flickering downward. There was a softness in her expression now, an unspoken understanding that passed between them. It was as if the weight of the battle, the destruction they had witnessed, and the bond they had forged was too much to put into words. I never thought I'd see this day, Thalia said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. For so long, I've watched my people struggle, watched them fight alone. But now, we have you, John, and we have the power to protect our world. John took a step forward, drawn by an invisible force, and the moment he closed the distance, he felt the connection between them surge again. It wasn't just the power of the armor or the heart. It was something they had both given to each other in the heat of battle. It was trust. It was respect. It was something that could never be severed. I didn't come here to be your savior, Thalia, John said softly, his voice hoarse from the battle, but filled with sincerity. I came here to help, but I can't do this alone. You're right, together, we can protect Alaris, but we have to do it together. Thalia's lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but she closed her mouth, her gaze flickering away for a moment before returning to him, steady and unflinching. You're right, John, she said, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. We are stronger together. Alaris is stronger with you by our side. John reached out instinctively, his hand brushing against hers, the touch almost electric as the armor's energy resonated with the heart beneath them. For a moment, they both stood there, connected by more than just their shared mission. Their bond, forged in the heat of battle and strengthened by the power of the heart, was unspoken but undeniable. The silence in the chamber stretched on, and John realized just how much had changed in such a short time. He had come here as a soldier, on a simple diplomatic mission, but now he stood as something more, a guardian, a protector. And with Thalia by his side, he knew they could face whatever came next. Together, the hum of the heart grew stronger, and John felt a strange sense of calm wash over him, as if the very planet itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The Voidern were gone, but there were still challenges ahead. They had won this battle, but the war for the survival of Alaris, and perhaps the galaxy, was far from over. But John wasn't afraid. The armor, the heart, and Thalia's unwavering resolve gave him strength. They had a purpose now. They had a future. And with that knowledge, John knew they could overcome any obstacle. Thalia finally broke the silence, her voice steady and filled with determination. "We'll rebuild, John. Alaris will rise again. And this time, we won't do it alone." John smiled, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon, the weight of the armor, a comforting presence. "Together," he said softly, the word carrying more meaning than it ever had before. The bond between them, forged in the fires of battle, would carry them through whatever lay ahead. The future of Alaris, and perhaps the galaxy, now rested in their hands. But they would face it, not as strangers, but as partners. Guardians of a world that had just begun to reclaim its power. And with that, John knew that no matter what came next, they would stand strong together. The path ahead was uncertain, but John felt a sense of peace he had never known before. With Thalia by his side and the armor's power at his command, they would protect Alaris, and they would protect each other. Together, they were unstoppable. ChatGPT said, "The sky above Valoria was a fading tapestry of crimson and gold as the last vestiges of the day slipped into twilight. The city, scarred by the battle, had already begun the slow process of healing, its people rising from the rubble, their spirits undaunted by the devastation that had threatened to consume them." John stood at the edge of the palace balcony, looking out over the city, his gaze distant yet focused. The armor, now a permanent extension of him, had become lighter with each passing day. It responded to his thoughts effortlessly, like an old friend whose presence he no longer questioned. It hummed with the energy of Alaris, a world now forever tied to him through the heart's power and his bond with Princess Thalia. The memory of the battle still lingered, a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. But it was a victory now, etched in the stones of the city and in the hearts of its people. Behind him, he could hear the soft footsteps of Thalia as she approached. She had spent the last few weeks overseeing the restoration of the palace, coordinating efforts to rebuild the city and heal the wounds left by the Voidern invasion. Her once distant demeanor had softened, replaced by a quiet strength that John admired more with each passing day. "John," Thalia's voice interrupted his thoughts. "The Federation envoy has departed. They're satisfied with the treaty. But there's something else." She paused, her eyes studying him with a mixture of fondness and something more. "Something deeper. They're offering us an alliance, John. Full military support in exchange for the knowledge of the heart. They want access to our technology, our weapons, our defense systems." John turned slowly to face her, the weight of her words sinking in. The Federation had always been about control, about asserting power over weaker worlds, and now they saw Alaris not as a partner, but as a resource to be exploited. "And you're considering it?" John asked, his voice more guarded than he intended. His protective instincts surged as he thought about the potential consequences of such an alliance. The Federation had always promised protection, but their actions often spoke of something else, something darker. Thalia sighed, her gaze lingering on him, softening. "I've always known that we would have to choose our path carefully. The Federation has given us a lifeline, but that lifeline comes with strings attached. You and I both know they won't stop until they have access to the heart, to its power. They want to harness it, John, to weaponize it, and I don't trust them." John stepped closer, his heart beating faster, not from the armor's power, but from the conversation that seemed to weigh heavier with every word. "So what do you want, Thalia? What's your plan?" Her lips parted slightly, as if the answer had been on the tip of her tongue all along. She reached for his hand, the soft touch grounding him in the present moment. "I want to protect Alaris. I want to ensure that the heart is never exploited. But we can't do it alone. We need allies, but we need the right kind of allies. If the Federation truly intends to help us rebuild, we have to make sure they understand one thing. Alaris is not for sale." John nodded, the resolve in her voice resonating with something deep within him. The heart of Alaris was more than just a source of power. It was a symbol of everything the planet had once been, and everything it could still become. He couldn't let it fall into the hands of those who would use it for their own gain. "You're right," John said quietly, his fingers tightening around hers. "The heart must remain ours, and we'll protect it together. But we need to. Be careful. The Federation won't stop pushing, and the more powerful we become, the more they'll want from us." Thalia's eyes met his, a spark of something unspoken passing between them. "And what if they don't understand? What if they don't accept our terms?" John's heart pounded with certainty. "Then we fight. Together." A brief silence fell between them, the weight of their words settling in the air like a heavy fog. There was no going back from this decision, no turning away from the path they would have to walk. But John didn't feel afraid. Not anymore. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. Thalia smiled, a glimmer of pride in her eyes. "I never thought I'd say this, John, but I'm glad you're here. You've given me more than I ever expected. You've given me hope." John squeezed her hand, his voice steady. "And you've given me more than I ever imagined. Alaris doesn't just need a protector, it needs a leader. And I think you're ready for that." The moment stretched on, the weight of their shared experiences pressing down on them, but in it, John felt something shift. The armor that had once seemed like a burden now felt like a gift, a bond between him and this world, between him and Thalia. It wasn't just about strength, it was about trust and love. As the last light of day faded from the horizon, leaving, the city bathed in the soft glow of the moon. John and Thalia stood together, overlooking the rebuilding city. Their future, like the world before them, was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. John turned his gaze toward the palace, his thoughts drifting to the battles they had fought and the ones that awaited them. The Federation was watching, and the galaxy was changing. But Alaris would stand strong. "We're just getting started," John said, his voice filled with determination. "But together, we'll make sure Alaris doesn't just survive. We'll make it thrive." Thalia's smile was the only answer he needed. Together, they were unstoppable. And with that, they faced the future, not as separate beings, but as partners, guardians of a world that had just begun to reclaim its power, its legacy, and its place in the stars. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but their story had only just begun.